For years, the truth stayed hidden. The victims forgotten. The cases left cold. Until science revealed what time could not. This is Decades in the Dark, where cold cases are brought back to light. In 1980, New York City never really slept. Streets stayed busy late into the night. People walked home after work, after visiting friends, after ordinary evenings that rarely ended in anything remarkable. For Barbara Tucker, one ordinary night became the last night of her life. Barbara was living in Queens. She had routines, familiarity with her neighborhood, and no known reason to fear the walk she was taking. Nothing about her movements that night suggested danger. There were no reports of arguments, no signs she was meeting someone, no indication she believed anything was wrong. At some point during that walk, Barbara encountered the person who would kill her. Her body was later discovered outdoors on a residential street. From the moment investigators arrived, it was clear this was not an accident and not a random medical event. Barbara had been violently attacked. The scene indicated that the assault happened where her body was found. There was no evidence she had been transported from another location. Investigators determined she had been sexually assaulted and then murdered. The nature of the injuries suggested a personal and sustained attack, not a sudden strike or hit-and-run scenario. Barbara fought back. Evidence at the scene showed signs of a struggle, but there were limits to what that evidence could reveal in 1980. There were no surveillance cameras, no cell phones, no digital footprints. What remained were fragments, physical evidence that could not yet speak clearly. No witnesses came forward who had seen the attack begin. No one reported seeing Barbara approached, followed, or forced into an encounter. No vehicle was observed leaving the area. Investigators could not determine whether the killer had followed her, waited nearby, or encountered her by chance. Police canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors and interviewing residents. Tips came in, but none led to a suspect. New York City was crowded and transient, and the lack of witnesses made the case extraordinarily difficult to solve. Investigators collected what evidence they could: clothing, biological material, trace evidence, and preserved it as best as the science of the time allowed. But without a suspect, the investigation began to stall. Days became weeks, weeks became months. Eventually, the case went cold. For Barbara's family, the pain didn't fade with time. They knew how she had died, but not who had taken her life. They were left with questions that had no answers, and a justice system that seemed unable to help. As years turned into decades, Barbara Tucker's case became one of many unsolved homicides buried in police archives. Detectives retired, leads dried up, hope became harder to hold on to. But one thing remained untouched by time: the evidence. As forensic science advanced, cold case units began reopening files that had once been considered unsolvable. DNA testing became more sophisticated. Samples that once yielded nothing could now produce full genetic profiles. In Barbara Tucker's case, investigators were finally able to extract a DNA profile from biological evidence preserved from the crime scene. For the first time, they had the genetic signature of her killer. When that DNA was run through criminal databases, it produced no matches. Instead, investigators turned to forensic genetic genealogy, a technique that doesn't rely on criminals already being in a database. Instead, it looks for relatives, distant family connections, shared ancestry. By uploading the unknown DNA profile into public genealogy databases, analysts identified people who shared portions of that genetic code. From there, they built extensive family trees, working backward through generations, narrowing possibilities based on age, location, and opportunity. It was a slow and painstaking process, but eventually, one man emerged as the likely suspect: Robert Arthur Plimpton. He had lived in New York at the time of Barbara's murder. He fit the age range. He had no known relationship to her, which explained why he had never appeared on police radar. For more than 40 years, he lived his life without facing consequences for what he had done, until science caught up. To confirm the match, detectives covertly collected Plimpton's DNA from a piece of discarded chewing gum he had thrown away. When that DNA was tested, it matched the genetic profile preserved from Barbara Tucker's murder. In 2023, investigators charged him with the murder of Barbara Tucker. The arrest did not erase the decades of loss. It did not undo the trauma her family endured. But it did something that once seemed impossible. It named her killer. Barbara Tucker was no longer just a cold case. Her story was no longer unfinished. Her name was spoken again, not as a statistic, but as a person whose life mattered. Her case is a reminder that time does not protect those who commit violence. Evidence waits, science evolves, and even after decades of silence, the truth can still be uncovered. This is Decades in the Dark, where science brings the past to light. Subscribe for more stories where justice never expires.